for people to turn them over. There are, some of you may have seen these, there are flyers that the US was dropping when it was bombing Afghanistan. And there's literally a face of an Arab, and then a face of a dollar sign, and then a face of the Arab behind bars. And there's this message that, and there's some language as well, these are all available on the web if you Google, saying things like, you know, basically turn in these suspects and you'll have enough money to support your family and your village for the rest of your life. $5,000 even is a lot of money in certain parts of the world. So we had, you know, 80% of the people captured in that climate, in that context. We have statements from military and CIA officials saying, you know, sometimes we just got the wrong guys. I mean, just admissions like that. And then again, you have the numbers themselves, which of the almost 800 people, about 500 have been released by now. And that itself is an indication that the US itself has recognized that most of those people never belonged. Most of the people in Guantánamo never belonged there in the first place. The second part that I wanted to discuss about the secrecy, and one of the most damaging implications, I think, and perhaps the most damning reason for the secrecy, is how the use of torture has been able to be you know, sanctioned and used against our clients in interrogations. From 2002 to 2004, before lawyers arrived at the base, Guantánamo prisoners were subjected to torture methods, which euphemistically were called enhanced interrogation techniques. One of our clients, his name is Mohammed Al-Qahtani, he is a Saudi, was subjected to the first special interrogation plan, which was sort of the first testing of how far we could go with torture at Guantánamo, sanctioned by Donald Rumsfeld himself. He was the subject, Mohammed, of this interrogation plan. Some of what he went through included 20-hour interrogation sessions combined with severe sleep deprivation for months at a time. When he would fall asleep from exhaustion, interrogators would forcibly make him stand and sit, pour water on him, or physically beat him. For 160 days within his first 2 years of imprisonment, he was kept in isolation. He was restrained in handcuffs for extended periods of time in stress positions. He was threatened with military dogs. And he was subjected to extreme methods of humiliation, just intended to completely break him down. Things like forced nudity, sometimes for long periods in stress positions, forced shaving of his beard as a form of religious abuse. That happened a lot at Guantánamo. There were even situations where guards would shave images of soccer balls and crosses into detainees' heads, just as a method of abuse and complete humiliation. There was one incident involving Mohammed where an interrogator tied a leash to his chains and led him around the room, forcing him to perform dog tricks. So, you know, one of our limitations, again, in talking about this stuff is that their words, they sound a little bit empty and clinical, and I think those are some of the ways that we've been able to see torture happen, you know, on television. There have been very few ways that we have of really expressing and conveying what that means for an individual. The pain and the humiliation. What I can say is that I saw, what I meant for Mohammed was that he was near death in terms of physical pain, near death on 2 occasions when his blood pressure, his heart rate dropped so low that he was rushed to a hospital, and this was during a period of extreme sleep deprivation. It's also meant psychologically, it's had a severe impact that way. I saw him in April, and after all his years at Guantánamo, he's been there since 2002, he had tried to commit suicide for the first time. So it's taking a toll. I mean, there's been the physical impact, and there's obviously also the psychological and the emotional impact. And he is broken, you know, sitting before a traumatized individual. He was actually also charged by a military commission for involvement in 9/11, and because really with him, and I know him as advocate, but really, with him, nothing he has said has not been extracted through torture. So the government actually came forward first with charges for him and then dropped them. He was part of the group of 9/11 co-conspirators. There were 6, and he was the 6th. And they eventually dropped the charges against him because I think even the government realized that just as a public relations issue, it would be a nightmare to go forward with the prosecution of someone whose interrogation has been very visible, very well documented. The reason it's been well documented actually is because his interrogation log was leaked, not because we've been able to really talk about it in any public way, but his records got out there through leaking because he was, in this special situation of being subject to the first special interrogation plan. So his story is very well known, his story of torture, and the government even dropped the charges against him. So words are all, we don't have the visual images of the torture. What videotapes have existed have been destroyed. We know that. There's been admissions from the CIA and the government. They've destroyed certain tapes interrogating Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and other detainees who were held in CIA detention where there are allegations that they were subjected to waterboarding. So those tapes don't exist, where at some point we might have been able to see them, and even if they weren't released anytime soon, we could have had a public accounting at some point, or truth-telling at some point in the future. That's not possible because the tapes are destroyed. But even in terms of talking about what's happened to our clients, at least with respect to the CIA detainees, those who've been held specifically in CIA detention and not just military detention, we can't even talk about their torture or their detention. We represent, because it's all so classified at such a high level, that you can only talk about it with other people who have that level of clearance, of security clearance. So we represent a detainee who was held in CIA secret detention for 3 years, and we're in this bizarre situation where the executive director of my organization doesn't know anything about him because the lawyers who have that level of security clearance can't talk to someone in our organization about him. So we're really limited, is what I'm trying to say, in this context of Guantánamo as a secret prison for a long time, and then all the restrictions we've had. The involvement of classified information is really limited and impacted our ability to tell the story of our clients, and in that absence, the government has really come forward strongly with their narrative. The last point I just wanted to make about what does get covered, the images of Abu Ghraib and prior images of waterboarding, they're important, and I'm glad they're out there, but they also have the effect of making less visible or less egregious certain other forms of torture that aren't as visible and that don't translate as easily into a photograph that's going to grab someone's attention. And I think that's actually the situation that most of our clients are in. How do you depict the experience visually in a photograph that a paper is going to pick up and circulate of someone who's been sitting in a 6x6 cell for 6.5 years in isolation? And for example, Jamel is in that situation where his cell is so small and he's been sitting in isolation for so long that he's going blind from staring at the walls of his cell all day. He's in a cell for 22 out of 24 hours a day, and he's going blind. But how do you depict that? And how do you take a picture of that? And that's really the situation that most of our clients are in. And because we are, again, limited in our ability to sort of visually convey these experiences, that's again part of why I think judges might be acting a little less urgently, might be listening a little bit more to the government, and why it is that we're nearing 2009 and Guantánamo is still open and many of our clients are still there. So I hope that evoked some questions for you, and I look forward to answering any questions you have after we're done. Thank you.